You've got mail.
Huh. I got invited. So I got invited to play the Arknights Endfield technical test. I guess Hypergriff decided that I'd be a suitable candidate to test their new game. What exactly is Arknights Endfield? But before that, I'd like to remind everyone that these videos take a long time to make, so if you can like, subscribe, and ring that bell, it will be a big help towards supporting my channel. Now that we're done with that, we can finally talk about this game's... Now, Arknights started out as a tower defense game mixed with gacha elements for mobile phones back in January 16, 2020. I played a ton of it during its heyday. It was a good addition to the gacha game wars that still persist to this day. It was fun. The story was sometimes impenetrable because my brain didn't really want to understand the story, because all I wanted to do was just play the game. But all in all, it was an atmospheric and most of the time serious story. A lot of the gameplay loop was getting better operators with the gacha system, then farm for their gear with the missions, and gather their items with the use of your base, wherein you can upgrade it to make it much more efficient in manufacturing required items to upgrade your operators. I eventually stopped playing due to my interests shifting and thinking that the game wouldn't really be any more than what it is during those times. So to my surprise, Hypergriff released out of nowhere a trailer for a new game based on the Arknights universe back in March 2022. Along with the said trailer, they also released a gameplay trailer. Please be aware that this video will contain minor spoilers and that this footage is from the technical test and is not the final version of the game. So in December of 2023, Hypergriff posted on their website that they were accepting applicants to play the Arknights Endfield technical test. Naturally, I was interested in signing up. Now, here we are in January 2024 talking about Arknights Endfield is what happens when you mix Arknights character design and setting with the base building mechanics of Factorio, mixed with the traversing mechanics of Death Stranding, mixed with the combat of Genshin Impact, and mixed with a gacha game where you get cute anime girls. Or guys, I don't discriminate. You'll start Arknights Endfield as the administrator of a company called Endfield Industries, with a crew of people who probably hasn't passed first grade English because they keep calling you administrator instead of just administrator.
Administrator. Administrator. Administrator. The administrator.
Administrator.
I swear to God, they should stop calling her administrator before I administrate my own life. And as you are being delivered to some place, your plane gets shot down by some dicks who are wearing what seems to be 31st century emo attire. And you wake up to do the mandatory tutorial level after teaching a bunch of enemies the important lesson of not being the main character. You then start to follow this girl in white, and she tells you not to approach this building. The game then immediately ignores that and decides to tell you to go to the said building. Thanks for giving me a mixed signals game. You are more confusing than my ex before we started going out. After waking up to that bad dream of a tutorial level, you wake up to a cutscene only to fall asleep and ferry you to another cutscene. Jokes aside, the cutscene explains how you are essentially the avatar for this company as you are their last resort. It is implied that the administrator is awoken only during the most desperate of times. After that somewhat hair-raising intro, you are now officially thrust into the game. And now we can finally talk about... While in the tutorial level, you were serving up some mean sword swings to your rock enemies. And by the way, the game calls them Angeloi.
These are the Angoloi.
But I refuse to call them Angeloi because it's spelled Agiloi. There's no NG in the name, but whatever, I digress. So anyways, after the tutorial level where you were killing enemies alone, now you're playing the game with an AI teammate. Your party can consist of 4 members, so this means that you can make wild combos or make an element-specific team to abuse a certain enemy's weakness or weaknesses. Combat loop is mostly hitting an enemy with a skill, and after every hit, you remove a white bar below their health. Those bars are called stability. You deplete them of their stability, they get what's called a break. This is where you roll your face on the keyboard and destroy that enemy with all 4 of your skills, or you could just forego all this break shenanigans and just plain old kill them with your normal attacks. without breaking the enemy's stability. But my main gripe with the game is how dry I felt about the combat. In an action game where there is telegraphed attacks where you are given the time to dodge, as a longtime gamer, it's my expectation, or I guess it's been programmed in my mind, that games like these have some sort of dodge mechanic. The game has it actually. You can use your skills to dodge or interrupt some attacks. Unfortunately, the game is literally asking me not to use my one skill to dodge attacks, because there is no dodge button in this game. So if you're the type of person to dump all your skills into an enemy, and then the enemy decides after getting their shit beat to use their largest AoE attack that hits like a truck, well then kid, there's no two ways about it, you better lube up because you're getting fucked. It doesn't help that your move speed is quite slow, so you can't rely on moving out of the way sometimes, as there is no dash button as well. You're essentially trapped between saving your skill to dodge and having subpar DPS, or not being able to reduce an enemy's stability quick enough for fear of not being able to dodge when the time comes. Other problems I've encountered is being bored to death by the basic enemy's decision making during fights. Their uncomplicated and simple routine leaves more to be desired, but fights are thankfully sometimes broken up by mini boss type enemies who are more of a challenge to fight and actually require some sort of thinking before you can murder your way through them. Now that leaves the boss fights. Some boss fights can be boiled down to run around in circles and wait for them to cast a big skill, for you to interrupt, then you beat their shit in with your crowd control skill. You repeat the strategy and you've basically won the boss fight. Some bosses, like the final boss for this technical test, thankfully was an actual challenge. It felt like it was impossible sometimes, as I've tried to fight this boss 3 times, but mostly it was just me being underleveled trying to rush through the game. Finally, I'd like to address the choice of having only one button available for skills. In this game, when you cast your skill enough times, you'll get an ultimate. The problem is, what if you just want to use your skill to kill an enemy, or just break an enemy? Well, you're shit out of luck, because in this game, if you want to do that, you're gonna waste your ultimate on whatever you want to use it on, because the skill button shares the same button as the ultimate. I understand that this game was designed for phones, but a little bit of a redesign and maybe improving the UI could be an option to accommodate the mobile crowd. But that's the combat. It's only one part of the gameplay loop that this game has. Like the mobile game, this game also has base building mechanics, and I think it's much more accurate to just call it factory management, as you are literally just playing Factorio or Satisfactory, but with anime girls. First, you start small as any other base building game. Eventually, it grows into this huge mess of conveyor belts that eventually all look like spaghetti when you look at it long enough. While you, the administrator, slowly watch the hours go by as you get sucked into the void of turning your small factory into a 100% efficient manufacturing machine, causing thousands upon thousands of damage upon the local ecosystem and wildlife, only to chase the dream of increasing that yield count by 5 per second. But what's the purpose of expanding your factory? The factory is mainly used to create things used to build, used to craft, or even used to upgrade your characters. The base has an upgrade tree similar to other games that has the same concepts as this. The dopamine definitely hits when you upgrade your factory to the point where things become more and more efficient, eventually building and rebuilding existing or non-existing pathways to make certain ingredients. But it's not without its flaws. In the build mode, you are expected to control how you build with the use of WASD to guide an in-game cursor that shows where you can or can't build, instead of just using the mouse to guide and control the build mode. Because of that, you end up with moments like this, or this, or this. I have no idea why they decided to make a base building game where you can expand to the level of this with the use of WASD controls, instead of just being an eye in the sky and do your work from there. Meanwhile, in the overworld, you can connect ziplines to make your life easier. You can teleport to certain locations, and within the map are places of interest wherein you have to run to get there. Some of these locations are places you go frequently too, so to make it easier, and the game allows you to do this, you can connect zip lines so you can just zip your way around the overworld using the build mechanic. It feels a bit backwards if you think about it. Why would you make it intentionally harder for your players to engage with your map? but allowing the player to make life easier for themselves via in-game mechanics is fun, at least for me. So I guess there's a gameplay loop in there somewhere too. Nothing feels better to me than a teleporter that directly gives me zipline access to a rift or dungeon that I always go to. It's the same as how in Death Stranding, you can make ways for yourself or use what other players built for you to traverse the map. But what about leveling and gearing, I hear you ask? Well then, I guess this is a good time to talk about. At the time of writing, you can level your character up to rank 5 or level 70. You can change their equipment, such as armor, gloves, and accessories, and you can also change their weapon. Items that level up your characters can be gathered through mission rewards, exploring the world, dungeons, or what the game calls rifts, or through your base. At a certain level, usually every 10 levels, you won't be able to level your character up, but instead, you are asked to promote your character. This requires a few things, but you can gather these things through the world and through the rifts. In the game, you're able to change the armor sets of your characters, unlike in the original. You have gloves, armor, and 2 accessories. Your beginner set of gear can be crafted on your inventory screen, but higher rarity gears require the base to craft them. Then, when you're finished with changing your gear, you can also change your weapon. Characters at the time of writing are stuck using only one weapon. You have the usual sword, greatsword, lance, and staff weapons. For some reason, in a game inside the Arknights universe, there is a serious lack of guns. Maybe they'll release one in the future. For now, you're stuck with the aforementioned weapons. Weapons can be leveled up and fitted with attachments. Leveling up a weapon is pretty simple. You can use sacrificial gear, such as other weapons, or you can use items similar to how you level up your character. Attachments, on the other hand, give additional effects to your weapon that can be changed at any time, except for when you're in combat. This can range from increased damage, or increased damage after a knockback, or to increased crit rate, or increased crit damage. There's a lot to choose from, so you can mix and match depending on what you need or what your team specializes in. Surprisingly, during the technical test, there was no available way to roll the dice and try to pull operators. But while I finished most of the technical test, there were still blank spaces in the menus that would probably contain the option to pull operators from and or weapons as well, the same way Genshin has. While finishing the technical test, I gave myself enough time to take in the world, its atmosphere and sounds. While the combat may be a bit lackluster sometimes, they definitely spared no expense in making the game look good. The UI definitely takes the cake, as I am a big fan of the dynamic menus from Persona 5. Despite the 60 FPS cap, the game plays smoothly and looks pretty with my 3090 and i9 10th Gen. The game is easy to run despite the dated hardware, but please still check for the minimum requirements to see if you can run the game. The music in the main menu screen before entering the game is definitely a favorite, but while it's my favorite because of its upbeat pace, I can say that the soundtrack while exploring the world is nice and puts you into a proper headspace of what the world of Talos 2 is, a dark, but sometimes bright and run-down planet with a few pockets of civilization trying to survive. But still, the game is quick to remind us that it's still essentially an alpha, and not a representation of the final product. I just hope for the sake of the game that they improve the things that should be improved. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.